Good evening. It's the 17th day of July, and we know we are in summer in Oklahoma. Another hot day. I hope that you're finding somewhere that's cool and you're staying hydrated. We've got a great deal to talk about tonight. We're going to be exploring the insanity that is now taking place at our State Department of Education, and more specifically at the person in charge of that. If you've been paying attention even minutely to the news lately, you've seen some of that craziness, not just reported in Oklahoma, but frankly, around the world. All of that and more on tonight's Hamilton Report. I say this every week, and I say it because it's true every week. I'm grateful that you chose to spend some time with us this evening, and I hope that you'll be glad that you did too. I have a great guest tonight, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of what's happening, and more specifically, what's not happening on behalf of school children in Oklahoma public schools. Many of us are product of public education in Oklahoma, and virtually none of us could have imagined that things would wind up where they are today. Before I introduce our guest, we're just going to take a quick snippet of some news. This is from Channel 6 in Tulsa. You've seen things very similar on other stations over the last couple of weeks, but take a look at this clip.
Well, State Superintendent Ryan Walters clashed with protesters during a Republican event in Norman last night.
One of the most controversial moments came when Walters discussed how schools can teach about the Tulsa Race Massacre while avoiding conflicts with the state law that bans the teaching of critical race theory while in the state.
But to say it was inherent in them because of their skin is where I say that is critical race theory. You're saying that a race defines a person. I reject that. So I would say you be judgmental of the issue, of the action, of the content, of the character of the individual, absolutely. But let's not tie it to the skin color and say that the skin color determined that.
Now, Walters ended the meeting by saying he looks forward to continuing to improve education and welcomes any opinions.
Well, he doesn't welcome any opinions. That part is for sure. He's very thin-skinned. And he then went on a tour talking about how the media misquoted him, when in fact, so many people had it directly on their cameras, exactly what he said. So it appears that he's just about incapable of telling the truth. But no one knows that better than my guest tonight, who is both an educator and a state representative. And it's my privilege to welcome to the Hamilton Report, Representative Jacob Rosecrants. Representative, good evening, and thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming on and letting folks know what's going on with the state and politics. But especially, and it's sad that this has to dominate all the time, what's going on with our education in Oklahoma. So I appreciate it.
Well, you have been an outspoken critic of the Walters administration since he's been at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And a lot of people are as angry as you are. I don't have school-age kids. I don't have kids at all. But I value public education. I went to public schools, and that's where I learned the basis of what would be a lifetime of learning for me. And you as an educator, I should point out that while you represent specifically the people of your district 46 in Norman, you truly represent all of Oklahoma when it comes to major issues like this one. Can you tell us how we got here?
Well, yes, and it's a sad and familiar story to many Democrats here in Oklahoma. It's from the ballot box, y'all. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Now, I will say Superintendent Walters does not engender a whole lot of love, even on his own side of the aisle. I've seen it at the Capitol. Does that mean people are trying to stop him? No, but from conversations I've had, they're just wondering like what's going on. And those conversations were happening before even, and that's why there was a primary in the Republican that race back in 2022. Now, the more common sense person, who's also my constituent, April Grace, didn't get through there. She got decently close, but Ryan Walters did. And if you're wondering what Ryan Walters did to do that, to get through there, it's the exact same thing he's doing right now. He is campaigning nonstop on every fear-mongering word or statement or whatever you want to call it that really gets that base riled up to try to get him through the primary, which that base still supports him, it seems, right now that he's in charge. So that's how it happened. But then, of course, when he became the general election choice, and we had the wonderful former teacher of the year, Gina Nelson, going against him, well, it came down to turnout. Turnout was extremely low for the last election, which is crazy to me because of that, honestly, and because of a few other reasons. Well, we got Stitt and we got Walters.
Yes,
and we are paying for those decisions. So what I mean, I'm not trying to shame people, but I'm saying, think about it. You were just running around; it was a little too busy, and you're like, "Oh, I'm not going to vote this time." You have to vote. You have to vote like your everything matters, because when you get people, especially in a one-party rule, supermajority state, they feel like they can do whatever when they take power. And that is exactly how Ryan Walters, and we have to say Matt Langston, his second in command, or his puppeteer, whoever you want to call that guy, what they're doing at the state capitol, at the State Department of Education right now. They feel like they can just do whatever they want with no pushback. And this is what happens with elections like that.
Absolutely. You mentioned Matt Langston. From what I can tell, he still lives in Texas, and yet he is being paid a six-figure salary to pull the shots, basically, the best way that I can see it. So let's talk about this particular issue. It seems to me that Ryan Walters wants to have his own unreality show, and I guess we could call it Extreme Makeover of American History, because that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
It's unfathomable to me that we cannot teach in Oklahoma the history of this nation. How can we reckon with where we are, and how can we possibly plan for the future? You're an educator. How are teachers doing this with both hands tied behind their backs?
Well, I'm not only a former educator, I'm a former history teacher. So, I try to put myself in the shoes of any history teacher right now. How do you do it? Well, and actually, to be honest with you, because I was a former teacher, and because honestly, education issues, those are reasons why I decided to run for office in the first place. So I stay pretty focused on those. I also have an ear and kind of catch the vibe of teachers around the state, and especially former history teachers, former geography teachers, and they are scared. They don't know what to do. They're like, first of all, I know that we're here to teach standards. I know that we're here to teach skills, and then the kids can make their own decisions about, history. That's something that people get mixed up. We're not teaching kids or indoctrinating kids exactly how things happen. We're teaching them skills so then they can use their critical thinking skills to break down what happened and then make their own decisions, maybe write a book about it, right? So that's what the whole big picture is there. But again, because these folks have found willing ears to the fear mongering that indoctrination's happening, that I guess this whole CRT thing, which it worked so well. It went through the Republican machine. They figured it out. They're like, CRT, it scares people. Okay, what is it? We don't know. Go
That's
for
okay.
it.
Let's just use
is it
it
attached
over
to
and over and
schools?
over.
It's attached to schools? Okay, perfect. Go for it. And that's exactly what happened. And so now with a passage, but in the past, these types of things would just kind of go by the wayside. Laws wouldn't be, signed to support them. It's all bullcrap. So when House Bill 1775, a couple of years ago passed, which is the one, the anti-CRT bill, it substantiates bullcrap. So in law, So you've got that, and then also the chilling effect that it's had in our classrooms, which you hear in the news or whatever else. And let's not forget too, it's all politics, because even the two CRT examples that happened in this state, one was Tulsa, and turned in by a teacher who's as far right as a human being can humanly be. So obviously an agenda there, but nope. And then one in Mustang Public Schools, which was a trust walk, which, hey, yeah, questionable, but they self-reported themselves and still got a hit against their accreditation. So you put all this together, it makes a huge crap sandwich. It's what we're dealing with right now. But the key is we have to keep shining the spotlight on these folks. They want to do their gaslighting in the dark. That's it. And then they want to be in the public saying whatever it is that they want you to hear. It's fascism 101.
It truly is. And when the people of Oklahoma who voted for him, they elected someone who was superintendent of public instruction. Let's be real clear about that. His job is superintendent of public instruction. And yet he was all in on the voucher scheme. Then he went all, when he saw that wasn't going to work, went all in on the tax cut thing. Well, that's also, let's just call it what it is. That's another name for a voucher scheme.
Yeah.
And what is really interesting is people don't know. I think that the average person can hear, you're going to get a tax credit if you send your kid to private school. Oh, that's great. But let's think about that for a moment. What has happened? Private schools are exempt from accepting students with disabilities. Okay, right there, that should tell you everything you need to know. But let's take it a step further. Many private schools in Oklahoma have raised their tuition this year in the exact amount of the tax credit. So what does that do? It further keeps the average Oklahoma child out of a private school. This does not happen by accident. So
No.
Here we can't teach in public schools what should be taught. We can't let public school kids into private schools because they're very selective. Where does that leave a parent today, Jacob?
First of all, we have to break down the whole issue of why parents get this first. Parents are a huge piece of a successful public school system, probably the biggest one there is, but they're a piece. So you have to see everything else kind of fits together like a nice little puzzle. So anybody who's trying to put a wedge in between parents and teachers is trying to break that puzzle. They're trying to make it chaos to where then they can say, hey, guess what? Those schools sure look like they're failing. How about a voucher to a private school? And then the ones that can afford it, they'll go. The ones that can't, they won't. And they'll stay in the quote unquote failing school. And that's the whole big overall picture. It's not just Ryan Walters' dream. Why do you think he went to these national, meetings and conferences, all these school choice, they took that. It's this big, huge push. It's part of the corporate reform, education reform system, but it's also to privatize, to make money, to be able to make money off your kids by saying these are failing schools. Here you go. Let's figure it out and have a couple different classes. That's what they really, really want. And that's what we're fighting against. Now, here in Oklahoma, I got to be honest, I've been kind of proud. We fought off vouchers pretty much ever since I've been there, since 2017. There's been a push every time, push. And then, most Democrats, almost all, plus I would say rural Republicans kind of teamed up and pushed against that until finally this year, the tax credit, the pressures on them, I will say, were quite amazing. It would be really tough, I think, sometimes to be a moderate Republican up at the Capitol because you can get ostracized a couple of times. But don't take that as apologism. It's not, because you got to show a backbone at some point, especially if you got elected saying you're going to fight for your public schools. So that's kind of my message there. But what's a parent to do? First of all, our public schools are doing great considering the fact that they're under attack by politicians. Yes. I mean, all the teachers I know are still working as hard as they can for your kids. And that's what they even decided to get into the profession to do in the first place, to teach your kids. They're there. That's what a parent is to do. Trust your public schools. Work within the public school system. They have an elected school board. If you have issues with a book or anything else, go through the process that already exists instead of empowering somebody at the very top to take control over your local decisions. That's what's happening.
And that's exactly what's happening. And I'm glad you mentioned issues with a book. Just because one person doesn't want their kid to read something, they should not be able to decide for everyone else. Right. This whole parents need to be in control of their child's education. No, they don't. As you said, they're an important part. They're integral to the success of a school kid. But they're not in a position to write curricula. They're not in a position to choose textbooks because they're not trained in that way. And so here we are, books being banned. And I swear, for every teacher who's going to be entering back into the classroom next month, you have my undying admiration because I don't think I could do it. I just don't think I could. So here we are. And you mentioned that Walters was going to all these school choice kinds of things. But how in the world can you reckon with the fact that this man, elected by the people, goes before an avowed hate group, a group of people recognized as an anti-government hate group against the LGBTQ plus community, and says to them from the stage, this is the most important gathering in Philadelphia since 1776. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. The man, I will say this about Walters, or maybe his handlers, they sure know how to keep him on the right track. He does not vary. He stays right on the hateful track, and he'll have a smile on his face. It doesn't matter. And hey, I will say this about him, though. I knew Ryan Walters before he became this Ryan Walters. So, as a human being and even a former teacher, I see a student who's maybe chosen the wrong path, right? But that's like me being very hopeful because the guy doesn't know another path. So then I'm like, okay, maybe I just need to talk to him. And it's like, that's not happening either. See, he was a history teacher too back in the day, Scott. He knows better, which then that even shows more red flags. And I tried to warn people before he got elected. I was like, hey, if he's saying these things, he's either a willing puppet or he believes them. And either way, you don't want this person in charge. It's a nightmare. Although I will say, this is worse than I could have ever nightmared in my entire history of nightmares. It really is. Because what they were able to do, Stitt and he, with the state school board. It is now in Stitt's image. They are a rubber stamp, and they will do whatever it is that Stitt and Walters want. And so they got everything they needed and wanted from the last election. It just goes to show you, man, I'm telling you, you hear it all the time, but elections matter.
Every election matters.
All of
every election matters. You're right.
Not just presidential. They all matter.
No. And our chair, Alicia Andrews, is fond of saying, it's the people who drive the same roads as you. It's the people who shop in the same stores as you. Those are the people who understand what you're dealing with. Right. And when Ryan Walters was still Secretary of Education and Superintendent of Public Instruction, drawing down two nice salaries, I don't even want to talk about how much he's being paid by the people of Oklahoma for the damage that he's doing. One of the big issues I've seen on social media, particularly on Twitter, when you say something about him, people immediately jump on you and they say, well, get rid of him. How come you and your colleagues aren't getting rid of him? What is the process of taking Ryan Walters out of this position?
Okay, I'll break it down as simply as I can because I had to learn it myself and it was a little bit confusing. All in all, it comes down to the majority party at the Capitol. Whoever is in the majority, they get the decision to do that. Right now, it's a double majority. It is the GOP. It is Republican legislators and Republican senators and their leadership who have that decision because in state statute, the way an impeachment would work of somebody who I do believe, by the way, has reached the level of impeachment. If you look at what it actually says in the letter of the statute, willful neglect of duty and incompetence every day, every dang day. it proves that. But no, back to what you were saying, it would come from an impeachment would come from the House, and then the court of impeachment would be in the Senate. So none of that can happen without having, well, obviously the party in power, the GOP, Republicans that are in charge, make that decision. So what have I been doing? I have been urging some colleagues of mine across the aisle. Again, Ryan Walters has not engendered a bunch of love. It's just he also hasn't engendered the type of opposition to impeach him. Now, will that change?
Why is that? Because so many of our lawmakers are from rural counties. I mean, most of Oklahoma is rural today. So how are they letting their schools be destroyed by this man and not up in arms?
What I've heard, and some are behind closed doors once again, and that's the problem. I'm like, listen, I can keep going and going and going and going. It's also not even politically expedient for me because I've been warning about people about Ryan Walters and this stuff since I was elected. But if just one of these rural representatives or senators would say something, it would change things. But again, it's politics. And another thing you have to really understand is that, Walters did pretty well in Oklahoma City and Tulsa during his primary. That's because that's where the private schools are, if you see how that works. Sure. So that's another area we have to look at. He didn't do so well in the rural areas. Now that did flip once it became, the straight party choice, Democrat, Republican. And then there you have it. But again, don't forget, he did get way fewer votes than even Stitt. And Stitt got fewer votes than most other governors. So it just goes to show you, they don't have a mandate to do this. There are people that are angry in the rural areas. What I suggest that they do, Democrat or not, Republican, whatever, if somebody represents you that's a Republican in the rural areas, that is the way it's going to be, because I don't believe there's any more Democrats representing those areas anymore. Reach out to them, create a conversation, let them understand, tell your story about how important your school is to your town, because I know that's the way it is out there. It's the lifeblood of a small town, your schools are. And make sure they understand that, yes, you would like for them to support the impeachment of Ryan Walters. And yes, I want to make sure people understand what happens then if that was to happen. Governor Stitt would appoint his replacement. But think about the pressure he would have after having a Republican House and a Republican Senate push his choice out, or the person elected out. Absolutely. There would be some leverage, I believe, if that happened, to put a decent person, somebody at least competent. They can be Republican, but just competent. So we can take charge of our State Department of Education, which is our most important agency, if you ask me. So
it is, and that's, the biggest part of our state's budget is within education, correct?
That's right.
And so, as you mentioned, in a lot of communities, the school district is the largest employer in that district. And so to continue to crumble it as we're doing, and we're talking about kids in school now, Representative. So my concern is they graduate, and how in the world can they be competitive with people who went to school outside of Oklahoma, who learned things, who understand a broader worldview than this very myopic whitewashing of history. And I'm using history because that's what we're talking about. But when we dumb down education, it ceases to do the one thing that I think is most important with education, and that is helping people learn how to think.
Right.
So what does the future portend for these young people today?
Well, let's break down, first of all, too, how many young folks do you know that even stay in the state? They're getting the heck out of Oklahoma. I can't even tell you how many of the last senior class from Norman North reached out to me. I got to know them just through political groups, whatever, going to the Capitol, and I kept in touch with them. Most are going either, to just where places better jobs. Yes, I know Texas, it's still red, but there's just more opportunity down there, I guess. And then other states that have laws that aren't so draconian and so 1950s, because young folks don't like that. Who really would? I mean, that's the whole point here. It's like, what kind of state are you wanting? Do you want a state where people would want to come and corporations would want to come and invest in you, but you're not willing to invest in the people of your own state? You're not willing to invest in your public schools, all children that are supposed to be, taken care of in our public schools, instead of, putting wedge issues and making chaos and fighting all the time with all that. No one's going to want to stick around. But it really, to get back to your question too, let's not forget our schools, our teachers within our schools are doing everything they humanly possibly can to push back against that within the law, because any teacher, but my big fear is though, Scott, that those teachers will quit. And I think that's the big hope of these people that want to kind of take things over, because then when you have somebody who's not as an expert or a true professional educator in a classroom that can handle all the different things, well, then you really are going to see scores just keep plummeting if it's all about test scores, which I really wish we could move past that, but that's a whole nother piece for a whole nother time. But so it's all purposeful. Once again, all of this is purposeful, not just politics, but to also slowly destroy your public schools. So then you can once again, have a couple different classes, and maybe this one you can make, monetize people off of or whatever else over here. And then that's the school for those kids. That's the whole big dream of this group, but they're really good at messaging, saying they're doing it for the kids. And then people just eat that up, and then they use the fear mongering. And here's the issue that you have. This is what right. It looks like.
We're going to be out of time in a moment, but I want to underscore something that you said. You said that it doesn't matter if your representative is a Republican or a Democrat. They are in a position to listen to their constituents. And I know every call that comes into your office, every email that comes into your office is logged. And so at the end of the week, you can say, I've heard from 63 parents this week who are really, really angry about the Department of Education. Well, let's face it. I mean, people that are serving at the state capitol want to continue to do that. And so they don't want a whole bunch of angry folks back home when they go to a barbecue on the 4th of July or Labor Day. And so please, folks, take Representative Rosecrants' words to heart. Pick up the phone, call the office of your representative, of your senator, and let them know that you're concerned, you're frustrated, you're angry, whatever emotions you're having. Because the one thing that I have not heard from parents is, I'm happy with things just the way they are. That's not happening. Are you getting any calls like that in your office?
No, in no way, shape, or form. And, and here's another thing, too, I do want to put out here. I have tried to reach out to some of the more far, right extremes, just to kind of understand the point of view. That way I could get to know it a little bit better. Fear is the thing, guys. Fear is it. It is. These people are so scared. They really are. And so these people are susceptible to the fear-mongering tactics. So it is still your representative or senator, if they're not saying something that's truthful, or if they're really digging into the indoctrination or whatever else, that's pure lies. And they're using it to try to stay in power. So please remember that too. Those folks need to understand that they represent you in their district, and they need to understand that your voice is just as important as anybody else's, because we're such in our silos these days. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat. Doesn't matter. You still need to reach out and have those conversations, because yes, Democrats may have a hard time, winning elected offices in rural areas, but there's plenty of Democrats in the rural areas still.
And we're making progress in that area too.
Good.
We're actively recruiting people to run for office. And I'll say this right here to our guests, our audience. If you are thinking about running for office, call us here at the state party. If you know someone who would be a great legislator, who's a Democrat, call us here at the party, and we will help you at every turn. Representative Rosecrants, it is always a pleasure to get to spend time with you in person or like this. You've been very, very helpful tonight and helping us tease out what is a horrible mess, frankly, for the people of Oklahoma. And I'm going to ask that you will come back and visit us again, because we really have just kind of scratched the surface tonight. But I want to hear more of what you're thinking. And I will ask this of you personally, if there's anything that we can do, and by that I mean Democrats writ large, if you will just reach out to me, let me know, and we'll get the word out to everyone, because it's going to take all of us to stop this madness.
Absolutely. One thing real quick, I'm just going to plug my social media because I've been very active, especially focused on the shenanigans and the BS that's happening at the top of the State Department of Education. And that's easy. It's Jacob Rosecrants. It's either, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and that's me. I do my own tweets, my own everything. And so if you get it might get kind of personal sometimes because I get a little angry about these things, but please, I'm also very, very accessible. So if you want to reach out to me, there's ways to do that on social media, or just email me at my, you can just Google it up and you go fill out the little thing and you're there. So thank you, Scott, for having me on.
My pleasure, my friend.
And we just got to keep focused on this. I know there's so many things that pull us kind of away, but realize that I am, with every breath of my body, I'm focused on this, trying to get to the end of it, trying to make the end happen a little bit quicker.
And that's why I appreciate you for who you are and what you do. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you real soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, folks, we are completely out of time tonight, but I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I know that I did, and I'm so grateful for Jacob Rosecrants and the other Democrats who serve so tirelessly and oftentimes thanklessly at the state capitol, because they really do have the best interest of all Oklahomans at heart. And so when you're calling your own legislators to complain about the state of education in Oklahoma, you may want to call some of the Democrats as well and just say thank you for what you do. Speaking of thanks, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful that you joined us this evening. I hope that you'll consider sharing this broadcast on your social media so that more people will hear and know what's going on and how working together we truly can make a difference. Thanks again. On behalf of all of us at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I'm Scott J. Hamilton, thanking you for joining us. Good night.